Resident Evil 4 is one of my favorite video games of all time, and I finally beat the Resident Evil 4 remake. I meant to have this video out a few days ago, but if there's any game in this world that I'm not going to rush to get through, it was this game. I took my time playing this, and I loved every single second. I'm about to review it. I'm going to show you some raw gameplay, but before I do that, you should consider subscribing. I talk about survival horror gaming all the time on this channel. You should check out my Dead Space review or my Callisto Protocol review. I also have a lot of Resident Evil videos and Silent Hill videos. You can check out my review of the Chainsaw demo that I released the day that demo was dropped. Or you can check out the unboxing video I did for the collector's edition of Resident Evil 4. I absolutely love that thing. Anyway, enough talking. Let's get into the review. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the atmosphere of this game. When it comes to just pure atmosphere and tone, this is probably my favorite Resident Evil game of all time. It takes the tone of that original Resident Evil 4 game and just makes it better, in my opinion. It's still campy. It still doesn't take itself that seriously, but yet it takes itself more seriously than the original Resident Evil 4 game did. And in my opinion, it creates this perfect blend of just campy, fun, action, horror, cult-like funness, and genuine, true Resident Evil drama when it's at its best. Everything from the sound design, the rain, the visuals of the torches and the pitchforks, the random religious chanting that you hear in the woods as you're exploring, or you hear in the halls of the castle. It's just the perfect tone and atmosphere to match a plot where the plot is about a brainwashed religious community attacking an American agent who's sent there to save and rescue the president's daughter. Again, it's still campy, but it's actually scary this time. I love the original Resident Evil 4 game. It's arguably my favorite video game of all time. And when I played it as a kid, it genuinely scared me. It freaked me out a lot. But each and every time that I replay it, especially as an adult, the horror elements are lost on me. And it becomes more and more obvious that it's just a pure action game. And one of the main things I wanted from this remake was to stay faithful, just like everyone else wanted. But I wanted them to incorporate horror and make it actually scary. And this remake did that perfectly. And it was such an incredible task that they achieved, because how do you take a game like Resident Evil 4, which pioneered third-person, over-the-shoulder, action-based games like that, but make it an actual, real, true survival horror game that is capable of freaking you out? I don't know the answer, but they did it and they succeeded, and I'm incredibly thankful for that. And the atmosphere and the tone of the game shifts perfectly to match how the gameplay changes as you progress throughout the story. Now, speaking of gameplay, that's what I want to talk about next, and I feel very confident in saying that this is my favorite Resident Evil game since the original Resident Evil 4 when it comes to the gameplay. It's just as great as the original, but in fact I think it is better in a lot of ways. One of my favorite things that they added in this remake is how it promotes exploration. There's a greater emphasis on backtracking, on collecting all the collectibles that you can get, all the treasures, all the mysteries. That mixed with these new side quests, I guess people are calling them, though I wouldn't really consider them side quests. They're those blue notes that you find left around, I think by the merchant, and he's basically just asking you to do random shit for him. Kill a couple rats here, shoot some blue medallions here, fight an optional mini boss here. It's fun stuff, and I love doing it. It wasn't the most elaborate new content, but I really appreciated that they did add it in the first place. Again, it really just promotes backtracking. It really just makes you want to fully explore this amazingly detailed map, and I loved it. And the combat is fantastic. I already mentioned this in my review of the Chainsaw demo, but the gunplay is the best gunplay from a Resident Evil game, especially in recent years. I will say it's undoubtedly the best gameplay since Resident Evil 7 Biohazard, and probably since a few games before that as well, at least in my opinion. The guns sound fantastic, and they have just this unique kick to them that makes it really feel meaty. And I love how they managed to incorporate some of the action elements of that original game, but not to the detriment of the horror. For example, like the original game, you can melee enemies. You can like shoot an enemy in the knee and then run up to them and roundhouse kick them. There's grenades, there's arrows with bombs on them. There's a lot of action in this game, just like that original, but yet it never feels like you're not playing a horror game, which I can't say was the case with that original Resident Evil 4. And plus, they added a lot of other new gameplay mechanics to promote the horror aspects of this game, like stealth, which I wasn't expecting to be in this game, but it was probably my favorite new addition gameplay-wise. You actually can sneak around, you can crouch, you can use your knife to stealth kill enemies. I might be wrong, let me know in the comments if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that this is the first Resident Evil game where stealth is like a legit, genuine gameplay mechanic. And I don't mean stealth like sneaking around enemies or running past enemies or just going through an area undetected so you don't have to waste resources. I mean like true stealth, like stealth killing people. And speaking of the bolt thrower with the mines attached to it and the stealth mechanics, a random thought, but this gameplay actually reminds me a lot of The Evil Within, one of my favorite survival horror games of all time. The Evil Within is actually directed by Shinji Mikami, who did the original Resident Evil 4. He actually did the first few Resident Evil games. Anyway, if you haven't played that game, you should go check it out. It kind of got mixed reviews when it first came out because of performance issues, but it's such a fantastic game, and if you liked the original Resident Evil 4, and more specifically, if you liked this Resident Evil 4 remake, you would love the Evil Within games. Go check those out. In this game, when it comes to the difficulty level, I played it on standard difficulty, and it felt perfect. One of my biggest critiques with Resident Evil these last few years, again, don't get me wrong, I love Resident Evil, but they were far too easy for me on standard mode. Resident Evil Village, I barely died. I didn't die during a single boss fight except for Mother Miranda at the very end. And I'm not the best gamer, you can probably tell that by this gameplay footage. Resident Evil 2 Remake, Resident Evil 3 Remake, again, the boss fights, the normal enemies, I barely died. I just feel like Resident Evil has been struggling to find a good difficulty. Either standard is way too easy, or hardcore mode, I think is the next difficulty level, is good for a lot of people. I know a lot of people love playing those. I personally am not into it. Those are a bit too challenging for me. I'm sure I could do it if I really wanted to and I tried. I just never feel motivated to do so. But this game, in my opinion, has a perfect difficulty level on standard difficulty. At first, it felt a bit too easy. I didn't really die much in the first few chapters, but that quickly changed. The cabin fight with Lewis, I probably died 7 times. And I didn't defeat a single boss in the first attempt. I think it took me 4 tries to beat Mendez. I think it took me 4 tries to beat Salazar. The final boss took me, I think, 2 tries. I do wish that fight was a bit harder, but it was still harder than the original game, in my opinion. But I just love that I died in this game. Every time that I saw the words, "You are dead," I loved the game a little bit more. Because again, in Village, I didn't die in a single boss fight except for the very end. But this game, every single boss fight, I died at least once. And I died several times on normal enemies, so that was just a plus. And also, the enemy variety in this game is the best of any Resident Evil game, and I stand by that. Again, one of my biggest critiques with the more recent Resident Evil games is they have these incredible enemies, but they just don't utilize them as much as they should. I mentioned this in one of my previous videos, but I'm going to mention it again here. But it's like playing through the Resident Evil 2 remake, for example. It's zombies, there's zombies everywhere, and that's fine. But then there's the zombie dogs, and there's the lickers, and there's a couple other enemies here and there, and I wish they were sprinkled throughout the playtime more, but they're not. They're just in these very small designated areas. It's like, here's an alleyway, here's where we fight the dog. Or here's a couple hallways, here's where we fight the lickers. Resident Evil 3 Remake does the same thing. We go through the sewers, there's the hunters. We go to that facility place and we fight the spiders, but you never see those enemies in any other locations. It's always bummed me out about a lot of Resident Evil games, but this game doesn't do that. There's a shit ton of enemy variety, and those enemies keep popping up and you keep fighting them. There were times where I thought I fought the last of a certain enemy type, and then they would pop up again like an hour later, and I loved it. Now I want to talk about the individual segments of this game. The village specifically felt like they recreated it practically perfectly. Obviously, there's a few things missing from it, like the gondolas. I'm really gonna miss those. I could be wrong, but based off memory, I feel like the village was practically like an 80% shot-for-shot recreation of the original, and the 20% that's not there is either stuff that was cut or changed. Like the salt mines weren't in the original, the lake was expanded upon a little bit, but I feel like the castle was changed far more than the village was. Based off my memory, I feel like the castle was only about 50% the same from the original, and again, the other 50% being new stuff that was either added or stuff that was cut out. But honestly, I'm not really complaining because the stuff that they added was fantastic. That section of the game where Leon is like on the battlements of the castle and he's running from the giant that's throwing rocks at him, or the El Gigante I should refer to him as. But I absolutely loved going through the castle. It really kept me on my toes because I really didn't know what to expect around the next corner or through the next hallway. There were some things that I was missing from the castle. For example, the lava section. I really missed the lava. And then the island, I remember even less of than the castle. So again, let me know if I'm wrong, but I do think that the island felt more familiar to me than the castle did. I think the island was more of a recreation, kind of like the village was, as opposed to practically a brand new thing. However, I did notice some things missing from the island section, which was super disappointing, specifically the U3 boss fight, one of the best bosses in that original game. However, I'm going to give Capcom the benefit of the doubt because Separate Ways, the Ada DLC, they're making it. I mean, I don't have any proof of that, so don't quote me on that, but it would be really weird if Capcom did not release a Separate Ways DLC in the future. So I'm hoping and I'm banking on that they cut that stuff out of the main campaign to make Separate Ways feel like a fuller product. Because as of right now, I'm super disappointed, specifically that the gondolas are gone and that the U3 boss is gone. But if they incorporate those moments into Ada's Separate Ways campaign, no complaints here. I think that'll be fantastic. In the island, just a random thought here. I know a lot of people don't like the island section of the original game, or maybe I shouldn't say that, but a lot of people think that the island section is the weakest act of the game, and I do agree with that. But at the end of the day, I love playing through the island in the original, and I really enjoyed playing through the island here in the remake. It is definitely probably my favorite third act of the more recent Resident Evil games. I definitely like it more than Heisenberg's factory from Resident Evil Village. I like it more than the hospital in Resident Evil 3, and I definitely like it more than the mines and the boat in Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. So I know a lot of people like to shit on the island, and I'm not invalidating those criticisms, but compared to a lot of other third acts in Resident Evil games, I think this one is really good. Now I want to talk about the characters. Probably the aspect of this game that I was looking forward to the most was the characters. I love Resident Evil, I love the characters, and I was really hoping that Capcom would take this game to really improve upon already iconic characters. And in my opinion, that's exactly what they did. This might be, no, it is. This is my favorite version of Leon, who already is my favorite Resident Evil character. I've said this in some of my previous Resident Evil videos, so if you've already watched those, I apologize for sounding like a broken record here. But I love Leon in Resident Evil 4. I love that he's sarcastic. I love that he's cocky. But I didn't really like how he didn't seem to be taking his situation too seriously in that game specifically. And then when he appears later in the animated movies and in Resident Evil 6, he's way too serious and he lost all the sense of humor that that character had from 4. This game, in my opinion, is the perfect version of Leon. He's sarcastic, he's funny, he knows how to tell a joke, but yet he's taking his situation seriously. He's motivated, he's determined, and he wants to get shit done. I just feel like they took the best elements of all eras of Leon and put them together to make, again, in my opinion, the best version of the character that we've gotten to date. And then Ashley was great. I never disliked Ashley in the original game. Again, full disclosure here, I know a lot of people were annoyed by her, and I guess it was annoying hearing her go, "Leon, help," every 30 seconds or whatever, but I never disliked her as a character. She never annoyed me. But this version of Ashley, I really, really like. In fact, I'm gonna go as far as saying I want her to appear in a future Resident Evil game, maybe even as an agent, because they hint at it a lot in this game. She brings up several times that maybe she can be partners with Leon, she can be an agent because they make a good team. I would love to see that game. I would love to see that happen. Capcom, make that happen. And I don't know if this is a hot take or not. I don't know if this is an unpopular opinion. I haven't watched anyone else's reviews. I haven't really read about what anyone else is thinking about this game or the characters. But next to Leon, Ashley, I think, gives the best voice performance in the game. She was fantastic. And then Lewis. I always loved Lewis in the original game. He was super memorable to me, and I was so excited to see that they were expanding on his character and his role in this story. But now he is officially my favorite supporting character in all of the Resident Evil games. I really love how everything they did with his character enhanced the story in some way. Not just Lewis as a character, which I was already excited about, but everything they did to expand him as a character also expanded upon the plot. So it was like a win-win. And speaking of that, I'm going to mention the story now. I'm not going to go too in-depth about the story, but I really, really liked the additions that they made to this story. It was the same story from the original, but everything they added onto it just made it feel like a better, more full narrative. Like, for example, the infection that Ashley and Leon had in them, the parasite growing inside of them. It always seemed like an afterthought in the original game, like it wasn't a true, genuine threat. You could play through that original game and for hours at a time forget they were even infected. But in this game, it was a true threat. It was a true part of the plot. It was always there lingering, and I loved it. But anyway, I'm going to get back to the characters now. And unfortunately, this is where I get into some critiques that I have with the game. Again, before I get into these critiques, I love this game. 10 out of 10. One of the best Resident Evil games ever. Anyway, I do have critiques though. First critique, Krauser. I love Jack Krauser. I loved him in the original game. And in fact, I think that his story and his character is improved upon in this game over the original. However, I just did not really personally like the voice actor that they chose for him. Okay, I won't say I didn't like the voice actor because there were some moments, there were some lines of dialogue that really hit, and they hit hard, and they hit good. But overall, the just performance that Capcom wanted Jack Krauser to be giving, I didn't like it. He came across like an anime villain to the 10th extreme, and I'm not an anime fan. I had the same critique with Resident Evil 8 Village, where Heisenberg just sounded like an anime villain, and it was so annoying to me. Jack Krauser sounds even more like an anime villain, and it was just so annoying to me. Now I'm gonna get to Ada. I know a lot of people have critiqued this. Again, I haven't watched reviews, I haven't read people's thoughts, but I've seen headlines and like gaming news sites that specifically talk about how people aren't fond of Ada. And unfortunately, I do kind of agree. She sounds very bored. She sounds very flat. She doesn't have a lot of emotion to her voice. But with that being said, just like Jack Krauser, there were some moments, there were some lines that she delivered that did come across really good, and they did hit hard. So I would like to see this voice actress return. I just hope that Capcom sort of directs her in a different way and she has more emotion in her voice. And I did see that the voice actress had to disable comments because she was getting harassed online because people didn't like her performance. That's just stupid. You shouldn't harass someone because you didn't like their performance. And now Hunnigan. I really like Hunnigan. I like that Hunnigan practically appears whenever we see Leon, much like Ada. But why did she disappear like a third of this way through the game? In the original game, she loses signal to Leon because Salazar takes over his communication device. That's never established in this game. Leon just stops communicating with her for seemingly no reason at all, and then she just never comes back. Leon never questions it. He never tries to get in contact with her. She's just gone and disappears. They barely communicate, and that was super disappointing to me. But anyway, there's my thoughts on the Resident Evil 4 remake. When they first announced this, just like a lot of other people, I didn't think it was necessary. I thought, and I still think, that a Resident Evil 4 is practically a perfect game as is, and it really didn't deserve to be remade. It didn't need to be remade because of how perfect it was, but every trailer that I saw, every gameplay footage that I saw leading up to its release sold me more and more, and now that I played it, now that I finished it, I'm so happy that it exists. It's one of my favorite Resident Evil games of all time. I think it's firmly in my top 3, maybe my top 4. But with that being said, do I think it's better than the original? I can't answer that, and I can't answer it non-biasedly, because Resident Evil 4 is the most important game to me. It's the most nostalgic game in my life. So of course I'm going to love it, and I'm always going to hold it in such a high regard because of what it means to me personally. But from a non-biased perspective, I wouldn't really disagree with someone who said that they think this game is far better than the original. But that doesn't mean that I do think it's far better than the original. I think that they stand toe in toe, neck and neck with each other. They're just great companion pieces to one another. Anyway, thank you for watching, especially if you watched this far. What did you think about the Resident Evil 4 remake? Do you plan to play it? Have you already beaten it? Are you in the middle of playing it? Which game do you want to see remade next? I hope it's Resident Evil Code Veronica. Based on the ending of this game and based on how Capcom seem to be going, it's probably going to be Resident Evil 5 that gets remade next, which is a bit weird to me. But oh well, I'm sure it's going to be fantastic, just like this game was fantastic. But please, 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 I hope they remake Code Veronica eventually. Anyway, thank you for watching. Consider subscribing, and thank you for watching, especially if you watch this far.